So the topic for the panel discussion is United States of Europe, Dream or Reality. And I must say, as an outsider looking in, I really have been quite impressed with the European Union. And I think sometimes I'm discouraged, as I talk to young leaders or even teenagers around Europe, where I notice sometimes they don't even really grasp how lucky we are to live at this moment, at this time. Here, for example, in Berlin, really with the European Union that has accomplished so much. And now at the time of Greece, this and that, we're getting all kinds of questions and we're becoming skeptical. But I really think, from an outsider looking in, I really look at Europe with a sense of tremendous gratitude and pride in terms of what has been achieved in such a great or very short period of time. And one of the questions I'd love to also address today, too, is quoting Jean Monnet, this question, should we have started with culture first? And I think that would be another aspect that would be quite interesting from the point of view of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy.
He never said it.
Okay, so, so it looks like we have the debate.
He did? No, he did not. No.
Okay,
No.
okay. He did, all right, so indeed. Okay. So the debate has already begun, but let me actually begin first of all by introducing the two newcomers to the panel discussion who we have not yet had a chance to meet. Maybe I will begin with Mr. Schäfer. Very happy that he could join us today. Mr. Schäfer has been a member of the German Parliament for the constituency of Bochum since 2002. He's also the European policy spokesman and chairman of the National Group of Nordrhein-Westfalen for the SPD. He's been a member of the SPD Party Council since 2001. Also from 1994 until 1999, he was member of the European Parliament. So really, again, he's had the chance to look at the German level as well as the European level through his impressive career. He is the vice president of the European Movement Germany. So I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Schäfer also to the panel. I'm also very pleased to welcome back, actually, our Professor Dr. Gläßner. We had the chance to meet each other last year, I guess it was, in the context of the German-Turkish program that we run. Amongst his many tasks at the Humboldt University, he also runs a joint degree with a German and a Turkish university. Professor Dr. Gert-Joachim Gläßner is professor of German politics at Humboldt University here in Berlin. He's also the director of the Berlin Graduate School of Social Sciences and the author of many books, including German Democracy from post-World War II to the present day, and the unification process in Germany from dictatorship to democracy. So we're very pleased also to have you on the panel discussion. I would like to begin the panel discussion with maybe a more general question, which would give the speakers also an opportunity to maybe present a provocative thesis or an idea that they haven't had a chance to share yet with us. And I'll maybe begin with Mr. Schäfer, and then we can go maybe from left until right. The question that I wanted to ask is EU membership limited by geography, or instead by values and a commitment to cooperation? Is there a possibility that countries geographically located outside of what we usually consider quote-unquote Europe might qualify for membership? How would you draw the lines, so to speak? And we have a microphone here. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it's very clear in the European Treaty. It's written that European countries can apply for membership, full stop. That means at the end, Ukraine, yes, Azerbaijan, I don't know, Georgia, yes, Morocco, they did it some years ago, not. And maybe in 50 or 100 years, Russia will also apply it, but I can't imagine this.
Okay, Professor Dr. Gläßner, I would also very much like your own insights as we discuss this big word, Europe. How would you respond to the question?
Well, the problem is that Europe has no borders. In the west, yes. In the south, the Mediterranean, yes. But what's about the east? And that's the first point. The second point is Europe is composed by quite different sorts of countries. Big countries, smaller countries, and very big countries like Russia. And thirdly, there are some states who are of imminent importance for European unification and for the development in Europe and beyond, which are partly European and partly not European, like Turkey. So the question about the future borders of Europe is also a question about security, geopolitics, and the very situation of the European countries vis-à-vis its neighbors. And I would say there are basically two crucial countries we have to look at. One is Russia indeed, and the other is Turkey. And the third dimension is those countries in North Africa like Morocco, Algeria, etc., Tunisia, who are very close to Europe but definitely not part of Europe.
And maybe just to respond to that, since I also know you have a lot of dealings with Turkey, as we look at, let's say, a case like Turkey, is it just a geopolitical question? Is it just an economic question? Or do values matter? Does religion matter? Does culture matter? I think it was our colleague from the Turkish embassy the other day mentioned that I guess the Turkish economy is actually the 6th largest as we look at Europe, quote unquote. So what is it really that matters in the end as we discuss this question of identity or Europe?
Well, I think values matter. All members of the European Union have to commit to the same basic values, which means liberal democracies, freedom of speech, rule of law, and a particular institutional setting which is normal for democracies. So Turkey is not yet a country which fully complies with these demands. First and secondly, Turkey is a very split country, so there are strong groups who are in favor of Europe. Often these groups are considered to be Islamistic, some people would say. Some other people who are allies and the traditional elites are anti-European, but more closely to the institutional ideas we have developed over decades. So the situation in Turkey is very, very complicated, and it doesn't fit the patterns of looking at states we are used in Western Europe. It partly has similarities to new democracies in the east of Europe and in the southeast of Europe.
Ambassador Dr. von Kyaw, how would you respond to that question? Is Europe limited by geography? What matters in the end as we discuss this European identity?
Well, as has already been pointed out, in the treaty it is said that only European countries can join our union. And this union is not only determined by geography, but also by values and common interests. But what geography is concerned, Turkey may not be considered entirely belonging to the geographic sphere of Europe, but it has been decided repeatedly that from the point of view of accession, Turkey is to be considered as European. That was decided the first time in the form of a treaty even in 1964. That was a conservative German government, still the Adenauer government, and it was repeated by accepting the candidature of Turkey under a social democratic green government in 2000. And both these decisions correspond to each other. Turkey is an important country from a strategic point of view, but also economically. And if you combine the two, then there is ample justification to accept at least a perspective of accession. We have already started the accession negotiations, and now we have certain problems. And these problems have to do with the union, internal problems, some member states getting cold feet, France, but to a certain extent also certain elements in the German body politics, not all of them, but for the moment, apparently enough. We have also some problems on the Turkish side. They are not yet sufficiently prepared. That has something to do with values, with religious freedom, but has something to do with maintaining and safeguarding the laicistic character of society, the role of the army. We still have on both sides, in the EU as well as in Turkey, problems. But the process is still intact, relatively speaking. It could be much better, and there's always the risk that it fails. Coming to Russia, I mean, we have not to forget Ukraine and others, but because I think they are much more important, or at least closer by, and Belarus and these countries. And they have all, according to the treaty, the possibility of joining. And we have strategic interest, certainly, in preventing these countries from turning too much east. And therefore, the European perspective has to be not only maintained, it has to be strengthened. It has not happened enough, as far as I'm concerned, over the last years, with negative consequences. But Russia is too big to be swallowed or digested. On the other hand, when Yeltsin was president, I was there at the summit in Corfu in 95-6. And there he officially declared at the table, the conference table. He was there in order to sign the first association agreement of the EU with Russia, and or cooperation, economic cooperation, kind of association, not a cooperation agreement. Association we are still working on. And he was very enthusiastic, and he told us at the table, he told the heads of state and government at the table that Russia, he saw Russia also one day as full member of the European Union. He had said that to me already before at the party, at the cocktail party. And the foreign minister, Kosyrev was it, or what was his name? Kosygin, translated in English because I didn't speak Russian, and I preferred not to answer that question of Yeltsin. But then at this dinner table, when Yeltsin officially, because I had goofed it up, I should have warned him, put the question, Mitterrand said, jamais, niemals, never.
The one thing I wanted to one point I wanted to make, I think, well, it's first of all, it's too soon to pronounce dead the project of European integration. It's of course not. I mean, if we cast some shadow of doubt about how far we have gotten in the process, or how successful we have been since 1949, 1950. I mean, my personal opinion is we have been tremendously successful if we look back, but that's not the point. The point is, I think the one challenge which we are seeing right now is whether we can, speaking about European Union, whether we can accomplish two things simultaneously. The one is internal cohesion or internal consolidation, and then the other thing is going outwards with enlargement. I think that's the real challenge, and because I'm tempted to say that we have too many unfixed or half-fixed things already within the European Union. We can be very happy about, yes, we have currency union. Okay, Latvia is not a part of the union yet, but it exists. I mean, it's the Eurozone exists. The question is, and there is a real challenge, can it exist, or can various degrees of integration coexist? I mean, if we have common European currency, how long it can exist successfully without properly integrated fiscal policies, tax policies? That's the question. Can it coexist? I mean, and if yes, for how long time? And then can really, in general, various degrees, how they can coexist within the European Union, various degrees of integration. I mean, some countries being into currency zone, some countries not being into currency zone. That's the one question. And then in the end, I would put one more point. I think that there is some hope that we might be pressed together for greater good. We might be pressed together by our business interests into closer cooperation. And this crisis shows that what? This crisis shows, for instance, there are ideas circulating already now about, for instance, things like common joint European rating agencies, European Monetary Fund, things like that. I mean, those are early indications, probably. Yeah? The question is whether it can get its own momentum and to push us further for closer integration within the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. My first question to you is related to size. The second question I'd like to ask is regarding weight. So the title, United States of Europe, Dream or Reality? We had a provocative conversation in our program, Europe Meets Latin America, a forum for young leaders. A similar conversation in our program, Cultural Diplomacy in Africa, which more or less was the provocative question, does Europe matter or will Europe matter? And one example that an African young leader was telling us about was if you look around in Africa in terms of development aid or trade, the Europeans go in and basically say, okay, we will help or we'll invest if you do this, this, and this. The Chinese go in, don't have any demands, and they build the roads and they get the job done. Latin America, we're finding a similar process where really China is really moving in with a strong force. So the question that I wanted to ask is, supposing that the United States of Europe does eventually occur, do you believe that the Eurosphere, quote unquote, has the potential to become a superpower and eventually overtake the USA? Can the soft power exercised throughout the EU triumph over the hard power caused by many US diplomats, so to speak? Can you see, and this is really for anyone who'd like to respond, will Europe be a superpower? How do you see this going in the next 10 to 20 years? China, India, etc. What kind of a future would you paint? I think we have optimists here in general, but I'd be curious just to see, does Europe matter? Will Europe matter in 20 years?
That's something for a politician.
All right, something for a politician. Mr. Schäfer, would you be willing to respond?
The European Union maybe will become the United States of Europe. I hope so. Our constitutional law based on this idea, and our Grundgesetz, our constitution, was written down in 1948-49. But what means United States of Europe? The United States of Europe never will be the same like the United States of America. We will have divided power between member states and the European Union, also in the future. Also in the future. And the question will be, member states, especially, of course, not the young leaders, the older leaders, the head of state and the head of government, are they willing, are they able to decide very soon and to decide on a common base? For example, the experience last year on the financial crisis. We know today, and we know this since a lot of years, we need a decision-making process in the European Union which goes faster, not so slow, but it based not only on values, it based on a common politics that the European Union is a has to play a very important role in the world, not only for peace and democracy in Europe. But what kind of role can it be, or will it be? Military role? Not on the same level like the United States. Economic, of course. We are actually stronger as the United States of America, of course stronger than China and all the others, but have we more power? But I think we must have more power, because otherwise China or the United States or India or Brasilia in the future, they are able to decide and to decide sooner. And we must be able to decide soon.
Ambassador Klava?
Yeah, if I may, I also would like to subscribe to the previous speaker about the decision-making capability that we have to be able to basically to decide faster, quicker. I think that two things. I think well, does Europe matter? Or yes, the answer definitely it is yes, but in what way? I mean, one can ask the question. The Europe as a superpower, again, what do we mean by superpower? If we mean economically, then Most likely, yes, but then also this is a continuous struggle not to lose the ground in global competition. It's an ongoing struggle. Militarily, I'm afraid not. Not in any sense. Exists only one very theoretical possibility in my mind, but we all in this room will not like it very much if it happens. It can happen only in one way, if things go forward not in a very democratic way in Europe. Only then there might theoretically emerge some sort of military superpower out of technology and this capacity, technological capacity, but that cannot be produced by democratic, I think, system. Then the sleeping Switzerland was mentioned. I would rather say that as a half serious, half joking, that probably no. As historian by education, I can say probably we can be not sleeping Switzerland right now, but rather like a Roman Republic at the very early stage, so to say, of its existence. They're making democratic decisions, but not really knowing where we go, how it will end, and so on and so on. So, but those comparisons, they are not very much relevant, just for fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, may I come back briefly still to the previous issue of enlargement? I think this is again. But funny. What is wrong with this one? No.
To speak right into it.
Enlargement is a process that becomes more and more difficult for the reasons given, but it is going on. We have the task, which we cannot avoid, the primary task of bringing stability to the whole Balkan region. And that means Western Balkan countries, which haven't yet been admitted, have to be brought in. Whether we like it or not, whether it costs cohesion or not, that we have to bring our house into order, we have to prepare. We are negotiating, we are almost finished, or at least probably finish this end of this year with Croatia. We have given clear signals to Macedonia, to Montenegro, to Albania, to Serbia, that they will all be able to join when they are sufficiently prepared. So one will come after the other. And each one will be admitted by treaty. And each treaty will offer an opportunity to also increase the institutional effectiveness of the Union in order to face more and more members. And this will be used. And then the French or whoever electorate that will be asked to admit Croatia will hesitate, certainly, I hope, to say no, because there are some institutional elements added, and at the same time contribute to the destabilization of the Balkans. There is a process going on, and we will continue to enlarge. And because we will continue to enlarge, we will also continue to have to deepen. It is not at all true, it has been proven in the past, that by going first towards enlargement, you forget deepening, strengthening the inner cohesion, the effectiveness in decision making. By first waiting for stronger inner cohesion, you will never get to anything, because there will be no sufficient pressure to make progress. What is the answer in the past has been is the combination of deepening and at the same time, enlarging and at the same time deepening and strengthening decision process. I don't think that this future offers anything different. It will just happen somewhat slower. Now, this United States of Europe business, I tried to explain that the integrated part comes close to what the United States of America is all about, the integrated part of European policies, which is the huge market, single market, the competition and trade policies, etc., including our common currency. But then we have the other part, and that is the 19th century, that is foreign and security policy. And if we want to play a role in the world and defend our interests, whether we like it or not, whether our nations and our national politicians pretend that they are fantastic and the nation state still has a future, we will either have to go further also in integrating those policies, or we will have more or less to abdicate and live more or less unhappily on our economic strengths without translating it into global influence. So it remains to be seen, but I think the perspective is in principle fairly obvious. Either we make it or we make it not. And since we want to survive and improve our well-being, my prediction is that in the end, not only the elitist projectors, but also the citizens will see the light, provided it is well enough explained to them. And this is the real challenge.
Thank you. Would you like to add something?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't believe in the United States of Europe anymore. As a vision, maybe yes, but as a real development in the last 10 or 20 years, I don't believe in that anymore. I'm sorry about that, but that's the way I perceive it. Why? Firstly, because the public in Europe, the people, the citizens in Europe, are citizens of nation states. And we are not yet at a point where something like a European public sphere has really developed all over the place. There's a deep division between a European public sphere to which we belong, you belong, we belong, many other people belong, who are working in European contexts, who are working in universities, who are exchanging students, who are exchanging professors, politicians, etc., and the wider public. So how to bridge this gap within a relatively short period of time, which means 10 or 20 years, I simply don't know. Secondly, people tend to hold their national politicians to account. That's the very basis of the democratic process. So if we want to achieve a more coherent European democracy, we have to do quite something. And this doesn't only mean to improve or to extend the rights of the European Parliament. This would mean to have intermediate organizations like parties, like interest groups, which are the very basis for everyday democratic life in nation states. And we don't have European trade unions. We don't have real European parties. The parties in the European Parliament are organizing along, well, party lines, which are quite common in nation states. But this is far from a coherent European party system. So a lot of problems lying ahead. So I would be very, very cautious. We have to aim at it. We have to work for that, but don't be too optimistic about the real achievements in the next period. So one of the basic things for better development would be to not only to convince the public, but to convince our politicians and public actors that they are actors on a European level and they act in a European context, and not to play the game which is quite common in politics, which says, well, if something problematic happens, well, it's Brussels or it's the EU or it's the Commission and whatever, and to blame European institutions in order to, not to be blamed by your own constituencies. First point. And second point is not to use the European Union as a tool for inventing some policies you wouldn't succeed with in your own political system. So you play the game via Brussels, and then it comes back as a European directive. So I work quite a lot on internal security problems in European countries. And I can tell you, if it comes to internal security, it's very popular with ministers for the interior, you know, to go to Brussels and to make some points there in Brussels to try to get the Brussels people to act, and then it comes back as a European directive, and they would say, well, sorry, it's Brussels. That's that's a game which has been played in Germany by different governments and ministers. Otto Schily and Schäuble were very perfect at that. So not to blame Brussels and not to play that game anymore. So it's not only the stupid public, it's also the politicians and quite a lot of intellectuals who behave in a very strange manner and who undermine the very idea of a deeper and more coherent European public sphere and public politics.
Thank you. I would like to ask one more question of the panel and then right away turn it over to the young leaders to ask questions. I know we have many questions that have arisen already throughout the week. Even though we're here at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, I'd like to ask at least one economic question. The financial crisis and the Greek debt crisis has led to calls for the establishment of a fiscal union instead of simply a monetary one. How likely is this, and is it desirable for a more stable economic union?
Something for a politician to answer.
Yeah? Mr. Schäfer, or who would like to go first? Yeah? Okay.
Of course, last year and this year we made a lot of new experience, but this experience based on a common history. That means it's necessary for the member states in the European Union to act together and also to act as a European Union as a whole. I think in the future, in the next 2, 3, 4 years, we need more common economic decisions. En français, Wirtschaftsregierung, nein, Germany. Economical government. Something like this. We need this because the experience of this actual crisis. And we need, after the explanations of Mr. Sarkozy and Mrs. Merkel, in the European Council, more decisions about economical affairs. Decisions, not only proportions. I think it would not be the same like the European common currency, but it goes in the same direction. It's a question about taxes, it's a question about employment, it's a question of technology, and we need more common European power, and of course it means especially the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats, also the Liberals and the Greens, in their national parties, they must debate, they must have a discussion about these problems. Actually, the discussions did not take place in the majority of our parties, only in the parliamentarian groups. And then we need also new ideas, and something must change. We can't work on the base of the 1990s. We are in the 21st century, and therefore we need something like an economic government.
Well, common fiscal and budget policy, yes, absolutely necessary, and a joint idea on how to deal with problems of social security, income, taxes, etc., etc. To give you one example, after 1990, when the Latvia and the Czech Republic and Hungary, etc., joined the European Union, hundreds of thousands of jobs were lost in Germany and went to these countries because they were much cheaper as to income and taxes. Today, Germany is blamed by other countries because our income is much lower than in other European countries. So this is something which in the long run wouldn't work if you have a common currency and quite different economic systems, income equality and different tax systems. So yes, it has to be improved, and this is a real significant step forward if it works.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely I can subscribe to this idea of deeper integration and more decisions on economic side. I think that's just as a phenomena. I can mention our own experience with indeed around the year 2003 to 2004, definitely 2005. When this discussion was gearing up about the kind of synchronization of taxation systems, we belonged to that camp actually in Latvia that said, no. We are going very liberal way. The market will take care of itself. We keep taxes as low as possible, and some countries in Western Europe want just to raise taxes, and that will make us incompatible, or our competition we will lose in sense of in competition with other countries. I think recent economic crisis and the fact that we have been raising our taxes now. The government, it has changed pretty much the opinion and how we see things happening nowadays or today in Europe. And yes, I think when we will reach, and I definitely think it will be beneficial when we will reach this harmonization, then on the European level or in the currency zone. Then the next step, of course, it's not over, but then it will be a game against the outside world. I mean, how competitive we stay with our taxation system, how productive, how modern, how competitive we are. And there, it's not over. One has to keep an eye always carefully, I mean, what kind of system we have internally. And then whether we can compete, whether it helps us to compete with outside world, with other players globally, in global economy, or downgrades us, and we have to think how to change something for inside the union. Thank you.
Well, nobody can be against common economic policies developed at European level. It's such a apparently useful thing. But how to bring this about, that's the real issue. We are presently faced with the consequences of a major international financial and following that economic crisis. No common European economic policy would have prevented us from falling victim of this crisis. No common European economic policy would have prevented us, I'm sorry to say that, from falling into the trap of falsified statistics from, sorry to say, Greece. So, no answer to any of the real challenges we are presently facing through this old French thing of gouvernement économique. In spite of that, I'm not in principle opposed, because why shouldn't the European Union, that does all kinds of things, not also try to develop a common economic policy? But how? The French, I have had the honor to listen at Humboldt University. A few days ago, you were also there, Fillon, the French Premier Minister. He spoke about common economic policy like Prime Minister Jospin a couple of years ago, a socialist, when he tried to preach us that this was the order of the day. And he spoke about growth and employment. I was tempted to ask the question, are you a socialist, Mr. Prime Minister? He's a sort of neo-Gaullist from Sarkozy's camp. And so, if there is growth in common economic policy, coordination, and employment, fine. It's necessary. But then please also stability of our euro. And that is to say, stable monetary affairs. This has to be on equal footing, because otherwise this wonderful coordination puts our central bank under impossible pressure. This is, by the way, also something which has to be observed when we do this European Monetary Fund business. If that is really a thing with the future, it needs to be ratified by all member states. Well, okay. It's a nice subject. It's challenging intellectually. But if we do it, it has to make certain that it does not undermine the independent policies aiming at price stability of our European Central Bank. That's the real issue. And those who are promoting this, willingly or not, are trying to have certain ideas behind them which have certainly not too much to do with stable money. But we have learned in Germany the hard way that without stable money there is no lasting growth. And this has not to be forgotten by all those who stampede behind employment and growth. And not to repeat it again, these issues have nothing to do with what we are really facing at this moment as a consequence of the financial crisis, including the Greek tragedy. But okay, it's the sovereign right of Russia and of China to have such cooperation in the context of this agreement there, or this conference. So with that, I have no problem. Energy security is a real challenge. Germany in particular, but not only Germany, is already too much dependent on Russian gas. And it is, frankly speaking, infringing on our freedom of action. So diversification is the order of the day. And diversification has something to do with different suppliers, whether it's from United Kingdom, from Algeria, and what have you. But it is also diversification in the sense of, for some, building nuclear power plants. This is a contentious subject in Germany. If you start going into that, you get crucified. Therefore, you could say maybe alternative energy resources could be developed further. And with some others, and most of our neighbors are doing that, nuclear energy. We will be then a non-nuclearized zone in the middle, but around us, 50 kilometers from our frontiers, they will all build nuclear power plants. We will have to live with it, happily or unhappily. But in any case, we will concentrate on alternative energy resources. And as much as possible, alternative or additional supplies. We are not against close contacts with Russia also in this gas business. We have very profitable and close ties, but you need diversification in order not to become overly dependent. And this is not only valid for Germany, we must also develop a common energy policy in the European Union, and this energy policy must cut away from this tendency which we still have, in particular with countries who have national champions. Germany is one of them, but not only Germany, also France, also Italy. At present, Russia, when dealing with Europe, Western Europe, it can pick one after the other and play one consumer against the other. And if the French do troubles, then the Germans are eager. When the other way around it works, then there are always the Italians ready. And it is really a wonderful game for Russia. Another aspect is we can never be sure whether one day, for whatever reasons, there could not be something shut off. So we have to develop internal supply routes to help each other out. This is in particular necessary from a solidarity point of view for our new members in the East. This is absolutely necessary. We need to have, ways of supplying through, for instance, the Northern Pipeline, but also internally. From our storages that we supply you, Poland, or whatever, if the thing in Ukraine is shut off, We have to develop these things. That costs money, but this is absolutely necessary because otherwise we are becoming too dependent. And this has to be avoided.
Yeah, if I may add a couple of things. Yeah, definitely I agree with need of diversification and additional capabilities to resupply partner countries or countries within the European Union. That is very much true spoken because I can speak from national perspective. We are 100% dependent on Russian natural gas and oil products. True to say that we have not, despite different sorts of quarrels on all kinds of things possible over the period of last 19 years, we have not experienced a single one interruption in supplies from Russia. Luckily saw that those are separate branches supplying us, not going via Ukraine. And there is, to some degree, mutual interest because we have underground capacity space, for instance, for natural gas, which is resupplying St. Petersburg during the winter. So there's a mutual dependence. But to say that, I mean, we indeed need reserve options, so to say. That's true. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, who would like to go next? I guess to the left, or? And please also say briefly where you're from also for the speakers. It's interesting.
My name is Olga. I'm from Ukraine. And I'm wondering, I have a very abstract question. I'm wondering what is, in your opinion, the European elite? And what is the European elite? What does it consist of?
Well, that's for scientists. well, it's a challenging question because there's no clear, in social sciences, there's no clear answer what elites really are. So we normally think of leading people in different parts of society and different institutional settings. So some people include professors, others not, but it's definitely politicians on the upper level. It's the military, the upper level of the military system. It's people from different branches of economy, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to European elites, it's even more complicated because the question is what composes European elites? And I would say, again, these groups I briefly mentioned, when they act, and most of these people are acting on a European level, are interacting with other people from other countries. Business people are interacting with other business people from France, from other countries, and the discussion they have is different from the discussion they have in their national context. If a trade unionist, for example, take Opel, General Motors. If General Motors is shutting down automobile plants in Europe, leading trade unionists in the affected countries would immediately start to work together. That the people of the Opel plants itself, the CEOs of these plants, would communicate with each other. They would attach and attract politicians and talk to politicians either to get money or support or both. So all cooperation, collaboration, and competition on these upper levels of social, economic, political, military, education, etc. institutions which are cross-national and which are basically aiming at a European level, not internationally. I would consider European elites. Not to forget the journalists.
Thank you. Would you like to respond?
So on the lead, I love it. Frankly speaking, those who are ignorant are not part of the elite. And ignorance you find in all sectors of society. Yes, I think so. And if the so-called elite would be able to deliver in solutions of challenges and problems, we would have no question of is there a lead, are the citizens too far away and all this. The problem of Europe is the non-solution of those problems and issues and challenges which no longer can be solved at national level. But these politicians of ours are not sufficiently willing to do that or not capable for whatever reasons. And this is why we are faced with an uneasiness, even a loss of support, not only in European affairs by our citizens, but also on national affairs. It is not true that criticism of European policy in Germany is stronger than criticism of German policy. At present, the German press and media are full of criticism of the present government in a way which is almost delirious, maybe, but it is a fact. And we are in the process of destroying our own fabrics of political life, and that has nothing to do with Europe. And why? Because those who are governing us at present, I'm no longer, I'm on pension, so I can speak freely. I tell you, they are no longer capable of delivering to the citizens, our elected voters, the impression that their affairs are well taken care of. And this is similar true in European affairs. And we have to learn to solve problems, to find out which problem can be solved in Germany, in our case, in Berlin, let's do it. Which case cannot, let's give full support to Brussels. And not all this blah, blah, blah. Because the citizens want to know where Germany goes, and not endless quarrels and non-solutions. And if we try to bring more transparency to something that doesn't deliver solutions or problems, makes it even worse. So I'm for accepting the challenges and go for solutions. Otherwise, we will stay put with all this miserable talk of pitiful self-pity. Kind of.
Professor Dr. Gläßner, would you like to?
Just one sentence. I totally agree with your basic critique on the ability of political and other leads to cope with the problems we have. But the concept of elites is not a normative concept. It simply says these are people who have a certain formal position, who have material or other power to proceed their own interests or the interests of people they call for. It's about cultural capital, social capital. It's about money and power, and that's what I mean. So this could be used in a positive, in a negative, in a productive, or in a problematic sense. That's a different sort of discussion. Yeah.
I would like to ask you, how do you see, because we spoke more about this conflict than about really mutual understanding among European people, European citizens. How do you think that this competition can improve the life quality of European citizens rather than create conflict? Because competition usually creates conflict among people.
Well, competition, it depends how we approach this issue. I mean, on a global scale, if you mean on a global scale, competition is being built into the market system anyway. If you do not compete, you lose to some extent, and that's in business is very clear, is much more clear than anywhere else expressed. And globally also, I mean, if we do not compete, that means like Europe, as European Union, as entity, as Eurozone, as European Union, as economic player, if we do not compete, that would be contrary to the logic upon which is built basically the market system. That means we lose some ground somewhere, somehow. what it means losing ground somewhere, somehow, to me, it means in simple terms, then we are losing jobs and all things attached there. If we speak about economic competition within the framework of generally accepted rules within this society and globally also. That's probably a complicated answer to a simple question, or yeah.
Well, I think competition is always good, as long as it is peaceful. And of course, the competition with China and the other threshold countries is peaceful for the time being. I think it's positive. It forces Europe to react, to get its act together. And that means to realize, in view of these enormous forces that are now developing there, and not only in Asia, that we can only do it as Europeans in common. So such kind of pressures maybe create a certain feeling of uneasiness, but in principle, from the point of view of promoting European unification, further European unity, is positive as far as I'm concerned. I have no problem with it.
Okay, I think we had some questions on the right-hand side.
Hi, I'm David from the Netherlands. In America, we have the American Dream, and the American Dream have helped a lot in the rise of the United States of America, creating uniformity and integration among the different states. Do you think that there's something like a European Dream? And if yes, how would it look like? And would it also help in creating uniformity and even give more identity to the European Union?
Yes, we had a European dream in the first years after the Second World War. When I grew up, we had a European dream. We dreamt that the United States of Europe would occur in our lifetime. But this has gone. So dreaming today means something much more practical. Yeah? How to improve what we have achieved, and to be positive and not critical at that point. What we have achieved is a system of cooperation and working together between Europe, basically accepted by most people, which had the historical result of having no war on the in Europe in my lifetime. If we forget about the Balkan War, which was partly due to the fact that the old system crumbled, and then secondly to the fact that this positive integration and cooperation, which prevents wars in Europe, wasn't established in that part of Europe. We forgot about that. So, having a European dream, I would say, consolidate what we have, and my dream would be to work on a future improvement of elements of a wider concept of democracy, which is not fixed on the very idea of a nation state. But this is a long, long haul, and I don't think I would see that in my lifetime. I'm not so old as I look.
I'm optimistic, of course. Yes, there is still a European dream. So the European dream is the United States of Europe. And the United States of Europe means that all over in the member states, people say the most important national interest of France, Great Britain, Poland, and Germany, the most important national interest is a European unification. And still, we are the only region in this world, with about more than 200 states. We are the only region where states and people have decided on the basic of peace, freedom and democracy to unite. Real existing states states existing since some longer than 1,000 years, to a special kind of unification, a special kind sui generis. And this is our dreams and our dream, and we start now with 27 member states. Maybe at the end we will have 38. Maybe we don't know when it ends, but this dream really exists.
I'm sharing this dream with an impressive German politician. They exist.
Thank you. I think also it depends very much from the attitude. How do you approach it? Definitely, I think that I'm convinced that the European dream exists, and I think one very important thing is the attitude, how we approach it. That we have to look always into the future and think that better things will come. That's one thing, and that's where we are sinners, I think, in Europe pretty much, and also in Latvia naturally, that societies in Europe are very much tended, or sometimes too much tended, to look back into history instead of, or it's disproportionate rather, to look too much into history. Instead, one should look pretty much more into future and think about what's coming around the next corner, so to say. And it's very important in order to move forward and really to accomplish this European dream. Thank you.
Okay, so a number of other questions. And maybe at this point, let's take two at a time, just to make sure that everyone gets a chance. And then, okay.
I would like to propose a footnote. And
introduce yourself too, please.
Sarni from Andorra. I would like to propose a very fast footnote and then ask a question. Some time ago, speaking with the Deputy Permanent Representative of Russia in the UN about the accession, a possible hypothetical future accession of Russia to the European Union. Well, I asked him about that, and he answered me, do you imagine in 50 years the European Union asking for admission in the Russian Federation? That will be the footnote. And then the question, what profile do you imagine for a political leader in the 21st century? Which profile for a leading figure in Europe in 20 years, let's say 25 years?
And I'd suggest we take one more question also, so two at a time. And then, okay. Sure. Or is there a related question? Or? Okay. Oh, well, maybe it looks like there's a related question in the front. So let's maybe take that first, and then we'll take the next two. Okay.
Hello, my name is Petros, coming from Greece. I think that I have to comment as regarding as how I see Europe in the future, and I don't believe there is a European dream anymore, because the fears of today life are how we will get along and how we will survive through the economical crisis. But yet there is the European responsibility, though, that these experiments will succeed. So I'm not referring that as the hopes that this experiment will succeed, like as an inspiration, like as a European dream, but this is a European responsibility, so that the generations that will come, they will see that this experiment actually succeeded, because we have to see that the globe, the Earth, is actually becoming even more too small to live all of us together. So if also we want to see a Europe to advance and become ahead of its time, then this experiment, it's not because it is a dream, must succeed because it's a responsibility as a model of success for the generations to come. Thank you.
Okay, now who would like to respond first?
I don't like the word dreams anymore because I used to dream about Europe when I was a student, and I'm no longer a student. But I like the word vision, prefer that. Because without vision, it's difficult. Vision means, for instance, yes, we have the vision of coming as closely as possible to a United States of Europe, knowing well how difficult it is, how we may possibly never reach it, but why not in certain areas, in certain within certain limits, etc. So a vision. Secondly, for those who don't like to dream and even dislike vision, then let's say common responsibility, because we are in this club and we want and have to make it a success, and also common interest. Common interest when we know that we can't do it better alone, but only better together. It is a real compulsion. You don't need to dream then. You don't even need to have a vision. So there's enough ample possibilities to come to the conclusion it's better to have more Europe than less.
Right. On both questions, I think upon the first one I touched already in the first session when I said that, namely about the profile of the future politician, or how it was asked, yeah, something. I think, yeah, that's some of us may not like how things are developing in that direction, because when we look at the political landscape and how we see those tendencies, that we have more and more technocrats and less vision, and politicians going after quick fixes. And basically why? Because societies are demanding quick fixes and not visions, and not long-lasting, so to say, policies. And it's interlinked, so to say, interdependent, so to say. It's both ways, politicians and societies. I mean, demand and supply. And yeah, it's probably, I mean, and there is quite often you can read somewhere in media or see in the media that people say, yeah, we lack great politicians and great statesmen in Europe nowadays. And I think to some extent it's true. And one has to pay attention to this one. Then whether we have or don't have European dream, I think once we say we don't have a European dream, so we sound so fatalistic, and I translate it as attempt to rob our future generations of that dream, whatever it might be.
Thank you. Okay, I would maybe suggest that we take the next two questions, first to my American colleague who's been waiting patiently there, and then one more. And try to keep the questions concise also, because we're running a little short on time. But please.
Okay, as you've mentioned, I am American, and so I wanted to comment on what my take is on the European dream. Now, to contrast that with the American dream, I honestly think that at a very basic level, the American dream is get rich and then improve your quality of life. And you can get rich by being an entrepreneur or working really hard. But to the very basic minimum, that's about it. To me, what the European dream is a higher quality of life minus just the money aspect. From what I've seen in Europe, from what I've been able to do here, from what I see these Europeans able to do here, they have so much more opportunity, in my opinion. You know, you guys get to travel around, you know, with little barriers. You know, traveling is cheap. Certain social benefits are a lot better. Things like more vacation time. And I think if you correlate vacation time with, you know, the American dream of working hard, we only have 2 weeks regularly of vacation. I mean, yeah, 2 weeks per year of vacation. And I think that has something to do to correlate with how much we value making profits and, you know, attaining wealth. As far as having better democracy in Europe, I always kind of respect the Europeans every time I see them protest on the streets. You know, when I see the French protest, because their, you know, working hours are going to go from 36 to 37, you know, things like that. Yeah, and, you know, better social benefits from what I hear in things like Sweden. You know, I mean, I think there's a lot of paid leave for women who are pregnant And that, you know, to me, that's awesome for them. I think in Europe, you guys are lucky enough to have the benefit of a lot of different cultures around you, and I honestly don't think that a United States of Europe would make you guys lose that culture. You guys, your culture has already been well established, whereas in America, the culture was established through, I mean, there wasn't really culture established until we took the lands of the Indians, basically. And things like innovation, for example, you guys are usually leaders, especially Germany, and things like, you know, wind energy, solar energy, things like that. That I respect in Europe, and to me, as an American, that's why I kind of envy the European dream, I guess you could say. But that was my comment. So now I have a question, and I want to put a hypothetical question. Say that you guys have attained the United States of Europe, and that you guys say, I don't know, I mean, this will sound scary to a lot, but say one central government with common economic policies and things like that. So it's a two-part question. So one part of it is, in economy, if you guys get this big central government, what would you guys do to equalize the quality of lives for everyone in the EU? For example, how would you equalize the quality of life for people in Romania and smaller countries like Lithuania to those with the quality of life for people in Germany? And also, would you guys promote a tax welfare system where people pay taxes, and that tax pool can go to struggling countries, for example? I mean, do you think that would help in situations where Greece right now is having trouble, you know, building up their economies, or, you know, with all the other countries having trouble? So that's for economy. And then as for security, if there was the United States of Europe, what would your guys' direction be in dealing with the Middle East? And more specifically, with you guys were mentioning China helping Africa, what would you guys do about, yeah.
We will solve all problems.
For you.
What would you guys, so how would you guys differ? I mean, if you guys were a bigger supranational power like you guys aspire to be, what would be your response to China helping, giving money to Africa with no questions asked? Will you guys still hold the same position where you have to say, oh, well, you guys have to promote better ideals before we give you guys aid? So, yeah, thank you.
So even though that was a big question, let's still take one more, because I want to make sure we give as many a chance as we can, because unfortunately the clock is not working in our favor. So let's take one more, and then we'll ask for some responses, please.
I'm Beatrice from Romania, and actually because he has so many questions, I just wanted to make a little comment, because it's something I've been thinking about for a longer time, but I didn't have the opportunity to say it, I don't know, to somebody who really can do something about it. So I'm happy that maybe this could be an input for you or for us if we can do something about it. And that would be, we are talking here about European identity, we are talking about the European dream, and talking about this stuff, I was very happy to hear that we are making the difference between European elite and normal people, because I believe that at least in Romania, this dream and all the European stuff and something like that are actually just for the politicians or for the elite, because the normal people are not very well informed. If they know something about the European Union, they just believe, okay, we are going to get some money. So they cannot feel this European identity. You cannot ask them, are you feeling European? Because they have no idea what to answer. And so this would be my, I don't know, please do me a favor and inform the people, not just in Romania, but everywhere, so that even normal people or the lower levels of the society, not just the elite and politicians, know something about the European Union. Thank you. And now the many questions that he has.
Okay, thank you very much. Who would like to begin to try to respond to the big questions? Yeah?
I take the last remarks you made. I think, yeah, well, I think this is a very important thing you mentioned, because there are a lot of possibilities to bridge that gap which is still existing. And then it comes to education, it comes to the press, it comes to the public, to public institutions. So one could do quite obvious normal things in order to improve the situation. For example, what we did, we established European studies programs. It's a university level, it's future elites, hopefully, but it's normal students. Not anyone gets to universities. There are schools, there are institutions who inform the public, and they have, in Germany, for example, Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung. It's a central institution for political education, also on the Länder level. So there are a lot of quite little things which could be much better organized, coordinated, and promoted. So raising awareness. But what I would say is the wrong way would be to inform people about the very functioning of European institutions. They would never learn it, and they would never know how it works in detail. No, it's not cynical. I think what is much better is how one could influence decisions on different levels, and who is acting on the European level, and how one could approach people. If you ask students of ours who have their Abitur in Germany, who went to the university, who have 1 or 2 years of political science, if you ask them for the difference, for the complicated setting of European institutions, they would often not be able to distinguish between the Council of Europe and the European Council, and et cetera, et cetera. So what you mentioned, that the very idea of what Europe is doing, what the advantages of Europe are, what it means for security, for example, what it means for economic development, for social security, all these things which are important for people in their everyday life. These topics should be mentioned and targeted and discussed.
Yes, thank you. Only 2 words. I think people need water and food. They need the sun. Also, they need education. But to survive, they only need visions. They also need visions. And the European dream is a vision. And this is necessary for the people here in Europe, all over the member states. Very easy to answer, very complicated for the realization, but without a European dream, no one in the parliament or in the parties can really act.
We do not live on bread alone, nor do we live alone on vision. We need both. And European identity, whether in Romania or elsewhere, to develop needs time, needs information, patience, needs information, needs political education, but also experience, positive experience. And if it is the flow of funds from Europe into your rural regions, into your infrastructure, over time, you will learn, as we have learned, and as East Germans continue to have to learn too. Not all of them, but still quite a lot of them. So this is a normal thing, and one should not be pessimistic in that regard. Now, this thing from the guy over there from the States, it reminded me of my year at Chicago University in the 50s. At that time, I had a dream. And that dream was to merge the American dream with the European dream. Maybe that is the answer to your question. You will have to think about it. We in Europe will not try to make everything equal. You didn't try it and you didn't manage, and we have no intention. We haven't even managed to make everything equal in Germany, and we have no intention to make everything equal in Germany. Of course, we want to assure if possible, a more or less equal standard of living to everybody in Germany. We haven't yet achieved that, for instance, between former West Germany and former East Germany. We are working on it. We're spending a lot of money with it, but we still haven't reached it. So also this needs time. And in the end, we will remain different. We are not equalizing everything, as you are not equalizing everything in the United States. We have also different standards of living in the United States. Some states are better than others, and there's also population moving. There you have an advantage. When there's a state in the United States that comes out of the doldrums better and has a higher standard of living, people from lower standard states can move there because the language is the same and the school system is the same, etc. This is not the case in Europe. There are different languages, and even in Germany we have different standards in our school system due to our federal system. So you have certain advantages. We have to cope with these disadvantages and accept them and maybe work at them. Now, we have no idea about, and no illusions about solving the problem of the Middle East, nor the problem of China. But what we know is that we will be able to influence developments there better, or to cope with them better by A, acting as Europeans and not as Germans, French, British, Italians, etc. And secondly, by trying to bring about as much similarity in attitudes and as much as possible a common approach between Europe and the United States. Because all these challenges are not only challenges to you Americans and us Europeans, but to the West as a whole. And this should not be forgotten.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I think we're already over 7:30, but I think if the panelists would allow, we'll take one more question, a final question from the audience, and then maybe one final closing statement from each of the panelists. Is that okay, first of all, with the panelists? I know some of you need to go, yeah? Okay, so one final question. I'll give maybe the difficult task to Katerina to choose, so I can be the diplomat here. And yeah, okay. Maybe Darnell in the back, or okay, okay.
I'm reluctant to take the microphone because I'm not officially a participant, and I'm kind of like want to give the mic to the participant. But I think it's important for me to say just a few things. There was this discussion, and the ambassador from Latvia mentioned that people in Greece were bringing up the Second World War, bringing up the occupation of Germany, and whether or not that's pertinent or relevant. I think it's very relevant, very pertinent, in that today in Europe we have a resurgence of Nazi, neo-fascist activity. In your country, in Latvia, it's very famous as a meeting place for a number of right-wing groups. Here in Germany, just 2 or 3 days ago in Guntersblum, 2 Nigerians were attacked by neo-Nazis. Now, I'm a war veteran, Vietnam War veteran. I can take care of myself as an individual, but even I, when I leave here, have to look over my shoulder and wonder if I'm going to be attacked. I'm going to formulate a question here, but the situation is such that there are many people who are living in Europe who don't have equal protection under the law or equal protection from the police and have to worry, quite frankly, about their lives. My question is this: is there a discussion within the European Union concerning that situation? And if so, what have been the results? In Latvia, what's being done to curb the neo-Nazi activity there, and quite frankly, and by the way, it's being supported by Nazis in the United States. In fact, the literature that's printed, that's illegal here in Germany, is printed in the United States. So there is this cooperation that's going on. It's an international movement. I think it's a very serious problem, and it's one that confronts everyone in the European Union. So these questions are very important. And what assurances do I have when I leave here tonight that I'm not going to be attacked? Now, that's a rhetorical question, of course. All right. You know, I've listened to a lot of things here, and a lot of these things are abstractions. You talked about crisis, but what crisis? How does this crisis manifest itself? What are we talking about? We're talking about social unrest. We're talking about a breakdown in the economic and political system. What just is it? Every night on the television, I'm looking at programs where people talk about crisis, but it's never explained. It's never articulated. And I think that rather than dealing in abstractions, people should be more concrete about just exactly what they mean. So that's all I have to say. And I think that she has a right to a question.
I agree.
Because
One
I'm not a
participant.
participant. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Final question from a participant. Anita, please.
Well, a clarifying question, what do you mean by the United States of Europe? Because I got the impression that you're talking about different things. Mr. Schäfer, I think he's thinking about European Union with more integration, but there's still the nation states within. And the rest, I think, is talking about the United States of Europe in the sense that there are no borders anymore, and it's a federal state. So like the model of the United States of America. And well, in this respect, I think you can't say then that there's any number of new members that could join the European Union, because you have to face a lot of problems. Not only there are the economical advantages and disadvantages, or well, also cultural problems that might come up. But I mean, you have to face the institutional problems. So for example, language problems. The European Union with 23 languages right now is already slow, so how would it become with 30 languages, for example? I mean, how would you process the whole thing? And I think in this case, if it becomes so slow, if you don't have any reforms in this respect, there would be no place for visions.
Thank you. Now, I would ask each of the panelists in responding to those questions also to make a brief closing statement, and if possible, maybe even offer one piece of advice. You have in front of you the future of Europe. If you could give maybe one piece of advice, let's say, in terms of the potential as well as the responsibilities that we as European citizens have, what might that be? And it can be something very short, but I would ask, who would like to go first? Maybe Mr. Schäfer, would you mind beginning, or the Ambassador of Latvia? Do the brief, we'll start with the Ambassador of Latvia. With a brief closing statement, and if possible, a piece of advice. I'm putting you on the spot. I haven't given you enough time to properly reflect. In terms of the potential, but also the responsibilities that they have as European citizens and/or Europeans, if they're not yet European citizens.
Yes, I have a piece of advice. Just go and do it. Okay. No, okay, right. I wanted to comment on that comment, which was before that. I think it's a serious enough issue to pay attention. I don't want to enter into another round or another session here, which would take a couple of hours at least to debate. But I just wanted to say one thing. Yes, I mean, it's all over the Europe, the resurgence of radicalism or radical groups, however marginal they might be, it is a problem. Partially, but only partially, it's connected to history. For instance, when you refer to Latvia, then hardly you can find anyone, I mean, who is declaring that Nazism was a kind of a good thing. Not at all. You could not find it. You can find a couple of insane persons, and I can only say that Latvia didn't start the Second World War, by the way. And as a country, it didn't exist during the Second World War. But radicalism as a marginal radical groups, it's indeed an acute problem all over Europe. I think it's feeded only partially because of history. It's feeded very much because of social problems
and issues related to immigration very much, and education about those processes and the level of tolerance, which actually should be addressed in each and every country. In extreme cases, we have to have, and we have already effectively functioning legal system in place to deal with extreme cases, which also might happen, and they are happening from time to time. Thank you. That's my comment.
This neo-fascist challenge has to be taken very seriously, but should not be exaggerated either. We have these tendencies all over Europe, but so far they are under control, even if excesses here and there really continue to take place. So we have to watch out, to be careful, to take legal actions, police actions, and at the same time work hard at to help educate people, because this is a question of education. In Germany, for instance, there is, it's always risky to generalize, but there is more neo-Nazi activity in the eastern part of the country than in the western, and that is not coincidental. There's also a link was mentioned with economic and social issues. By the way, that was also one of the reasons why the whole thing came upon us before 33. It had to do with the economic crisis. And this serious crisis of that time was this time in Europe avoided. We have a crisis, but it is nothing in comparison what we faced, our parents and forefathers faced in the late 20s, early 30s, which brought Hitler about. And that was that one of the reasons why it didn't happen is that our social security systems are better developed. But a major reason was also, and has also been, that we have avoided the beggar thy neighbor policies of those days. In those days, everybody started to develop his currency, all the countries. And everybody tried to get an advantage to the detriment of the others. And this is the huge advantage of the euro. It has avoided these competitive devaluations as a response to the crisis. It is to the credit of the Greek government that in spite of their real crisis, they are doing everything to avoid to come into the situation where they can again develop by re-establishing their own currency and getting out of. No, it's the official policy of the Greek government not to have this happen again, and this is in connection with Greek efforts to bring the house in order, then a justification it need be to give them also the help they need, or may need, hopefully not, but may need. So I think this is all interrelated, and we have to combat all the elements of neo-fascism and neo-Nazism wherever it appears, and it is not only appearing in Latvia, it's not only showing its ugly face here and there in Germany. No, you have it also in other countries which are allegedly proven democracies.
But the very danger for our political systems, for our political culture in various countries in Europe is right-wing populism, because they are putting forward xenophobic ideas. They are against modernization as it is, which includes the free flow of ideas and people, not only goods and money. And the very challenge is indeed, I would say, that on the one hand, conservative parties have the duty to address people who tend to vote for these parties, as social democrats have the duty to try to get those voters back who are shifting to the left too far. But the challenge is how to deal with that. And if I look, for example, to the Netherlands, a formerly very, very liberal and open-minded country, where the possibility is quite obvious that the Christian Democratic Party, losing its majority, would join with that right-wing populist movement of De Ville. Or if you look at the example of Austria some 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when Europe tried to make a point and put Austria on the side, but it only worked for half a year or so, and then they came back. So the very challenge is how democratic parties would bridge that gap between reintegrating people who left the middle ground of educated and civilized politics on the one hand, and not to make themselves common with those people whom they have lost voters to. And this is a very, very messy thing and very complicated.
Two brief comments, I would say, on this radicalism issue. I think what is for me personally astonishing is to see really a neo-Nazi movement in countries, in cases which were actually attacked by Nazis. And in particular, I would like to mention Russia, which is a particularly strong manifestation, and this is a surprise, actually. This is a surprise. But as I said, I mean, this serious issue, we have to distinguish between mainstream political movements, of course, and populists and really right-wing extremist and neo-Nazi movements. But I mean, the ways to address it is either by education in the schooling system, which we have done in Latvia. We have introduced additional subjects into our schooling and teaching about the history issues, about the Holocaust. And we have to do it politically. We don't have in Latvia any political parties in the parliament or in local governments of that kind, but it's not a guarantee, of course, by itself in a longer perspective, so it has to be monitored. Or in the end, we have to address it legally, by legal means. That's as clear as that. Additional final point on languages, I think it's a simple issue because for us, for Latvians, because we have no illusion whatsoever that the rest of the European Union countries will learn Latvian, though we have to learn languages. That's as simple as that. So it's not a problem for us. Thank you.
Well, this neo-fascism is against all European values and against the constitutionally enshrined values also of the member states. So from that point of view, the situation is clear. We have to combat these excesses. And they are to be found in many, if not all or most of the member states. But I think so far they are, relatively speaking, without wishing to belittle this, relatively speaking, under control. They are connected with the crisis situation, economic and social situation at present. How to cope with it? You can't do it only with education. You can do it by improving the well-being of the people, but education is important. It takes only time. I can clearly say that where political education has been neglected in Germany over the last 50 years, there is more neo-Nazism. It's in the East. And they have had Hitler fascism and afterwards communism. And they have, in addition now, a problem not only because of the financial crisis, they have also a problem to adapt to the new, if you want to put it this way, market economy, capitalistic system. That's not easy because you are suddenly supposed to be on your own while for 50 years everything had been told to you what to do. So it's not easy. So, and there are young people who have not made it in East Germany, who are skinheads and compensate their frustration by going against foreigners of a special kind. Yeah? And so this is very serious. We do with police work and with education, we try our best. But we cannot guarantee that everything will dissipate quickly. We had such things, by the way, also in West Germany immediately after the war. And it also, with economic and development education, went away. And I think you have to give us, as long as we combat these evil, you have us also to give a certain time to erase it. And how to do that is also very complicated. It's not as easy, he's now gone, unfortunately, by simply isolating them. I'm talking not about neo-Nazi movement now, but about these regrettable right-wing populist movements. Sometimes it's smarter to integrate and embrace them, provided the partner in government is much bigger and stronger. And this worked in Austria with what the Christian Democrats did there. It did. It did. It was a huge mistake by those who promoted this. It was a political thing, but okay. We don't need to discuss this because the last thing I want is to get into quarrels with a professor from a distinguished German university. That's always too dangerous. Yeah, it's dangerous because the Germans never believe in ambassadors, but always in professors. I know that, yes. Yes, you may have forgotten this, but it's still true. And in doctors, medical doctors. I mean, you have a competition there, yes. But we have no chance as diplomats and ambassadors with, so it's a complicated story, but I can tell you that we are trying. I can foresee now, we have soon are going to have elections in Hungary. I can see there a huge problem coming over us. And not only because of what the consequences in Hungary, I mean, the group will get 8, I don't know, maybe 10%. Huh? 5 to 10, okay. That's big enough. But they have already a difficult policy in promoting all the Hungarians living in the surroundings, still living according to the Treaty of Trianon in other neighboring countries like Slovakia, etc. And how this will be played out by the new government will be a real threat to the cohesion of the union in this area. And we will come, if possibly, to a point where we'll have, as a union, to take a position. I hope it will not be the case that the possible future, probably future Hungarian Prime Minister will be smart enough, Orban, but no guarantee can be given. This I see as a real approaching issue where the old devils of nationalism in the Balkans might come up again. The other things, well, yes, it was a shock for the French president that southern France, Le Pen, had to come back. It's amazing. But it has, of course, to do probably with the problems coming from Northern Africa. And it is illegal or not immigration. And there is indeed a problem there. And I don't know how the French will be able to cope with this. This is a very complicated story. And there are, again, no easy answers. And of course, Le Pen will not be considered acceptable. But I remember that the French answer to the Haider problem was determined for Chirac by Le Pen. He wanted to beat Haider in order to give a warning to the eagerness of the Belgians to promote this campaign against Austria was determined by the Vlaamse Blok. And I could give you other examples. There was even domestic policy reasons also in Germany. But that had nothing to do with fascism. It had to do with Bavaria, to say it frankly. And a certain prime minister in Bavaria at that time, who had close links to Austria, and also, by the way, in the banking sector to Mr. Haider, as we now learned only. Yeah? as we now know. And so there were all kinds of very domestic policy-oriented considerations. We have to be careful. We have to give Mr. Orban, now when he comes to power, a chance to prove that he handles his situation in a European spirit. If not, we will have to think something, if need be, first through the European Parliament, but we have possibilities to develop counter pressures if things get out of control in a certain member state. You do not immediately need to isolate, but we have pressure possibilities. And we are aware of this, so I can assure you we have not fallen victim to complacency in this regard.
John Kennedy, actually, who said we need to fight to make the world safe for democracy, but also safe for diversity. And I think really as we think about diversity in every sense, what we were just discussing and also before in terms of the United States of Europe, I think it's very relevant. But I just wanted to thank the fellow panelists for really a very thought-provoking panel discussion. It's a shame we have to bring it to an end because I think we could easily have gone on much longer. But really, I've been very inspired and also intrigued by many of the questions from the audience as well as the answers and points from the panel. So if we could all join in a very, very big thank you for the fellow panelists. Thank you.